Hi, I'm Kenny Klaus, and this is State 48 Homeowner.
Hey everybody, welcome to the State 48 Homeowner Podcast. I'm Scott Kooiman, and with me today from Fidelity National Title, we have Alysia Moore and Don Czajkowski. Now, Don, you were just mentioning a minute ago that you didn't get gas today.
I did not.
And I had the same morning. I was driving home last night, and I saw it was getting low, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that in the morning.
It can wait till morning. And now I've got a 40-mile drive, and I've got 30 miles to empty after this.
Fortunately, I did stop before I came to the office. You didn't.
Yeah.
So, Alysia, we did not plan well today.
Oh, I know. It's okay.
Well, she drives the electric car. So she just goes home, plugs it in.
I don't have to go to the gas station.
Yeah.
I've got a good old electric car, whatever. Yeah. But, I will say, you can run out of battery, and in a moment of panic, I have had to have somebody follow me from the office to go find a charging station and then drive me back to the office because I forgot to charge my car and I got to go all the way up to Scottsdale.
Well, they just built a charging station in your parking lot now,
yes,
right? Was that by your request?
Yeah, of course,
maybe. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, I've done this too many times.
So you don't plan well either. Okay.
No, not really. I try.
So how can homeowners plan well before they make their next move? Did you see that segue?
Great segue, man. Scott, you are money today. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll say one of the number one things, and you might all laugh at this, but it happens more often than you would think. Ensure you come to the signing table with an unexpired government-issued ID. Because our notaries cannot sign you if you have an expired non-government issued ID.
So no Blockbuster card.
No Blockbuster card, no AAA card, no Costco cards. It has to be government issued ID. So if for some reason this does happen, you got to go down to MVD, get a temporary. We can get you back in for signing. It just could potentially hinder, your closing being on time, unfortunately. So please make sure you have an unexpired government issued ID.
And this is like one of those things that it just happens, right? Like people they're like, whatever, they lost their, I've been in the office when people they come in, oh my gosh, I lost my wallet last weekend and all this stuff. But you're buying a house and people are giving you a big loan and, or selling a house and we, have to make sure it's the right people and have to be able to verify all of that. And so those are going to be super important parts.
And some of these are conversations that we have in advance. When we find out somebody is a cash buyer, we do let them know that their proof of funds cannot be a photograph of a briefcase
full of money.
And people don't, they're well, why not? That's showing them I have the money.
Yeah.
No, you actually have to show that you have the money. So we do need to be able to have our ID, have our proof of funds or our pre-qualification. We need to have documents in hand. And you guys are pretty good about letting buyers and sellers know ahead of time what they need to bring with them.
Oh, absolutely. So when we call to schedule your signings, we will tell you at that time, if you're a buyer, these are the amount of funds that are needed for closing, must be certified funds. Like Scott said, you cannot come in with a briefcase full of cash. That's not going to work.
On that note, though, I remember when I started, I was in the office when you guys were still over on Val Vista. I was in that office and there was a phone call and somebody was really angry because they, Alysia and the team were telling them, look, you can't bring in $350,000 in cash. We're not equipped to deal with $350,000 in cash. And
did they at least bring it in bill form and not pennies?
Right? Yeah.
I mean, it would have been great to see.
We stayed up all night rolling these pennies and nickels.
Yeah. But it's just and I remember there was a heated conversation over the phone about it, and I was like, it's cash, and but we don't have security people here. We don't have a vault to put all that money into. And all that stuff. Just not in a position to accept that.
Yeah.
And so
but it does have to be certified funds. Certified funds has to be in the form of a cashier's check or a wire. Again, unfortunately, we are not equipped. We're not a bank. We don't have vaults. We don't have safes. We can't keep cash on hand. We don't have the security behind us to facilitate that. So that's why we don't take cash.
We used to have a title company as a neighbor in our building. And they got broken into, and the thieves were very disappointed that there was no cash.
Yeah, surprise,
there was nothing
guys.
to actually break in and get it.
We don't keep cash.
The Klaus team is different. With the Klaus team, you have someone on your side. Where you live and make memories is important. We have more unique strategies than anyone else to help you accomplish what matters most to you. We can help you with traditional real estate as well as other options such as our lease purchase programs. We can help you buy first then sell, and we can bring you instant offers. We're here to help our neighbors achieve the American dream and help them build wealth through home ownership. For more info or to start your home search, visit us online at klausteam.com.
But I would say too, like as a seller and a buyer, to help all parties involved in the transaction. If you have any plans, leaving the country, gonna go take that 2-week cruise, unexpected family emergency comes up, whatever the case may be, please communicate that, because in the end, it's only going to help not have a delay in your transaction. I can't tell you how many times we've called, sellers. Even it happened to us this week. We call a seller, hey, I'm on a plane halfway across the United States. Well, we're closing tomorrow. Oh, but I had a trip planned. Please communicate that.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just, just those last days.
Absolutely.
It's anytime, even when we're going to be out showing homes, when we're got an offer out, we're waiting for responses. Anytime from contract to close, they're at the closing table. We need to make sure that you know that you are doing one of the biggest things in your life. You're buying a home. You just need to make sure that your schedule allows to be able to either pick up the phone when you're called, or text back and say when you can, or just respond to texts within an hour.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of limitations around some of the things, right? Around the travel, especially international travel. I just got a call from one of our partners that's a lender recently, and they said, well, we've got with another title company, we've got this, and you guys can do remote online notary signings, and they can't, and why is this, and why is that, and so is everything, all this stuff requires approvals in advance. And, we're going to be putting an insurance policy on this title. And so all these things need, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars in most cases. And so we need to make sure that all the things are legitimate and are good. And that's what, so when the question is, well, why can't they just do the same thing you guys can do? It's like, well, we already vetted the process in the system, and that company hasn't. And so, and we ended up moving because the people unexpectedly were in Mexico for like 2 weeks, and they're like, well, why can't we just go to the consulate and sign? And that's not so easy either.
No, and again, to piggyback international travel, if you are going to be traveling internationally, let your agent know as soon as possible. Even at the time of you're taking your listing, you're signing your contract, let them know, because the consulates, more often than not, they are weeks out for appointments. So yeah, while you could still do that as an option, doesn't mean there's going to be availability in order to make that time for your signing to get those docs back. And international overnighting of docs is sometimes 5 to 10 days, depending on where it is coming from, because it's got to go through all of those processes over there internationally in customs, and then hit customs here and be examined and then sent to us. So it's a process. So yeah, international travel, especially if you're going international, please give somebody in the transaction a fair warning so that we can help circumvent any delays as much as possible.
And you do a lot with mobile notaries as well, so even domestic travel. But if you're going to be in Montana, out in the middle of nowhere, there's not necessarily going to be a notary that's going to be able to go out there and get the signatures done. And locally, I've been in other states and bought houses while I was there here in Arizona, but had the documents delivered out there and signed off on the documents while I was there. Again, planned, and that was part of the whole strategy. But for that's not available everywhere. So making sure that you're someplace where we're going to be able to have those services for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And not assuming that because you're within the United States, like Don said, small towns don't necessarily have the notaries that would be necessarily available in the Phoenix metropolitan area. So yes, definitely just give anybody a heads up in the transaction that you're not going to be available, because that will help circumvent delays in the transaction. And we see it more often than not, and we do our best. Obviously, we're not miracle workers, at least not every day. So please tell somebody in the transaction, for sure.
And then we want to do our homework in advance too.
Oh yeah.
And double check that settlement statement.
Yep. So with that, I would say with that as a seller, know that going into a transaction, we're going to be asking for some personal information to pay off those debts. If you don't see something on the settlement statement and you know it's out there, even as an agent, we send those out in advance to make sure that we're paying everything that was disclosed in the spuds, or it was, of record that the seller knew about. So please, make sure that you are, as a seller, readily available to provide the information necessary for us to reference those things on the settlement statement. The payoffs of your mortgage, payoffs of solar, unfortunately sometimes, judgments and liens. So even as a buyer,
and just because it didn't show up on the settlement statement does not mean that you're not going to owe it.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it does happen. Things don't show up, and then it doesn't necessarily mean because it didn't show up it doesn't exist. If it exists and you know that it exists, disclose it. The more that we know, the better we can help you, the better we can help the client in the future as well. And then that way it doesn't chase you as a seller, or even as a buyer, it doesn't chase you down the road, and then we're having to deal with it later. So
and if you're working with the Klaus team and you're working with Fidelity, you're going to know that at least 3 people have gone over that before you see it, because with the Klaus team, our transaction manager looks at it. At least one agent will look over it, sometimes more. And you guys will review it. And sometimes we find things that somebody forgot to mention, seller forgot to mention, buyer forgot to mention. And so we want to go over that stuff with a fine-tooth comb so that we make sure everything is groovy.
Yeah, and I would say, to piggyback this, of the unexpected or the things that you would assume don't exist, but they do. For sellers, HELOCs, lines of credits, please, you open your transaction, you go under contract, do not take a draw on your HELOC or your line of credit, because it has happened. We go down to closing, we hit record on that record button, we're getting on the phone with that HELOC company and verifying, because we have to verify because it is a drawable line. Oh, they just took a $40,000 draw. Please know that $40,000 draw is going to come out of your proceeds. So do not take a draw on your HELOC or your line of credit and then assume, hey, out of sight, out of mind, I can do this. No, I mean, more often than not, we're freezing them anyways as soon as we order the payoff. It's obviously the lender on that side facilitating that freeze. But please don't, if you still have access to it, do not take an extra draw on your line of credit, because that will diminish your proceeds.
And rule of thumb, if you're a buyer, just nothing regarding credit.
Yes, don't go out and buy fancy cars. Don't go out and buy that brand new furniture, those crazy cool appliances with TVs and your refrigerator doors. Wait till you close.
I think it's so hard for so many people, though, right? It's because they're excited and like their new house, and they want all these things, and they're trying to plan for that
and zero down for 18 months.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, those kind of things are and like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is gonna and then they find out the hard way that it's impacted something, and it's hit their debt to income ratios. It's hit other issues that are now precluding them from being able to buy, and that's just never goes well.
Yeah. And even, I mean, this is more on a lender side, but even if you have a change in your job, I mean, you have to communicate that, because we have seen that too. Job change, and it was not communicated, and 9th hour, we're either delayed weeks because of it, or in some cases, unfortunately, transaction cancels.
Hey everyone, this is Kenny Klaus with Klaus Team Real Estate Solutions. We know there's a lot of confusion in today's market, whether it's billboards, TV, radio, mail. Everyone's trying to get your attention. They offer one lane, where at the Klaus Team, we have over 20 different programs we can help you navigate through to find out what's best for you. And remember, we work for you, they work for themselves. We're here to represent you and make sure you have the best experience possible.
Visit us at klausteam.com/callusfirst. The other thing we want to make sure is that we're paying attention to how much money we need to bring to closing.
Yes, absolutely. We will always send a copy of the settlement statement to the parties involved. As far as knowing how much money you need to bring in, we go over that when we schedule the signings. But I would definitely, if you have questions as a buyer, even as a seller, because unfortunately, we have seen it in a few cases in the last couple of weeks, sellers are having to come to the table with some funds to close. But always ask questions. Make sure that you're seeing those figures in advance. If you know that it's going to be a little bit tight, make sure that you're in communication with lender. You're in communication with us as a title and escrow company and going over those figures. We will give you those figures at the time that we coordinate your signing. But yeah, make sure that you have gotten your figure before you're scheduled to sign and that you are, able to provide those funds for closing.
From my own experience, I'd also suggest that you make sure you plan with your bank ahead of time, your financial institution. Yeah. It's funny because I feel like that's been such a big thing for them to have less people available. And I was purchasing a home about a year and a half ago, and trying to get an appointment at the bank it was ridiculous. And I was, for the certified funds, and I was just so frustrated by that process. Every couple of years I'm like, all right, I'm quitting this bank. And I've been like 20 something years client, but fortunately they taught me how to do a wire myself, so I was able to do it myself. But it was just so frustrating. And so I think you just need to make sure that you've got a strategy and a plan for how you're going to have that exact dollar amount for the closing. Mm-hmm.
Well, and there are so many new banking options out there that a lot of people are using those online platform banks because they give better rates, they give, better incentives. So if you are a buyer, and in some cases a seller, if you have to bring in funds, if you are a buyer that is, putting all their funds into a bank that is primarily online, that process for you as far as getting closing funds looks completely different. That is a conversation you're going to have to pick up the phone with your bank well in advance to make sure, hey, in some cases we've seen we have to have a copy of their ID faxed with a signed authorization form with our wiring instructions, and the processing time for those wires can take 3 to 5 days. So definitely, if you are using an online platform bank, make sure that you have communicated with your bank what processes you're going through and what that looks like on their end, so that we can make sure we get you that figure well in advance so you can get those funds on their way, so we're not delaying in close.
So bottom line, if you're about to close on a transaction or you're thinking about making a transaction in the future, just reach out and say, hey, exactly what do I need? And in the words of Scar from the Lion King, be prepared.
Yes,
thank you, guys.
All right,
thank you.
Thanks for spending time with us this week at State 48 Homeowner, the ins and outs of owning an Arizona home. You can connect with us for more information, submit topics you'd like us to further discuss. You can see relevant videos, give us feedback, answer your real estate questions, and more at state48homeowner.com.